Hello, I'm Evan Armitage. I'm recording my presentation for Cognition, and I'm covering memory. The date today is November 17th, and it is 11:13 p.m., so I'm cutting this a little short. So, like I said, my topic today is memory. I'm mainly talking about the acquisition, storage, and retrieval memory, and especially short-term and long-term as the main systems. So, just kind of reading some of what I've already put in my script. Firstly, I'd like to say it's one of the most important parts of cognition. Obviously, that seems, apparent. We need to be able to take in, store, and retrieve memories. But without it, we would not be able to eat food, breathe, find out where we are in our house, even name or recognize people we live with. So this is something that impacts every part of our lives, essentially every moment of the day. Um, the topic itself is still being studied. There's kind of a very good general consensus and working theories on it for right now, but a lot of the information is still being studied and just kind of being, I guess, finely tuned. So for a basic understanding, before memory is consolidated or even understood, input must be presented to the person who's able to take it in and then make sense of it. So obviously that, again, you need something to go in to create the memory, but this is kind of like with our sensory our nervous system. We take senses from our eyes, our nose, our ears, and something external that is then taken in and processed. I'm learning that in anatomy, so I'm just comparing it, and it's a way to remember it. So in the book, it is compared, and our book for Norton is compared to like a computer. Some sort of outside input is entered. It is then stored into a hard drive and retrieved later by a series of processes that kind of narrow down where the memory will be stored. Similar to how our computers would store something as a photo or a video or a document, our mind does the same thing in retrieving a memory. So in the book, the main model I focused on was one proposed by, I think, Waugh and Norman in 1965, and that is the modal model. Essentially, sensor information, or in the computer analogy, input is provided to the person or presented to them. It is then interpreted through sensory ways, so we see icons, or we hear words, or we see letters, or however it is presented is then taken in, usually through our eyes or ears, and taken in and understood to be something of meaning. From there, it is put through a cycle, and the term they use over and over is rehearsal, where the short-term memory is using something in rehearsal over and over. So, for example, if you want to remember someone's name, you'll say the name 10 times over and over. That's Dylan, that's Dylan, that's Dylan. Long term, although this continues, it is eventually put away in storage. Short-term memory is in a continuous cycle where the memory is either just continues to go for a while and is sent out or replaced by something else. That's why it's also termed working memory and not just short-term memory. According to this model, the sensory information is determined to be short or long-term, and at that point, that is when it is either discarded or replaced or saved for long-term memory. Ideas and thoughts that are actively being thought of are considered working memory, not short-term necessarily, but very similarly. And the main difference is that working is that it is continuously and actively being processed. Short-term memory is something that, although it may not be actively processed at the moment, let's say you had to find a password or a code for a website, or you're not thinking about the digits continuously every second of the process, it is still being kind of temporarily held in your mind. There's also a tendency to remember the earliest and latest pieces of information, which is the recency and primacy effect, which is lightly we've touched upon it, but that mainly affects short term, not as much long term, because long term is fully thought out and elaborated, essentially consolidated memory, where you tend to have knowledge in all aspects of the process or the image or the whole picture, not just small parts. Um, Despite the difference, they do have a lot of characteristics that are shared. For instance, there's a supposed idea that the bandwidth of short-term memory is highly linked to long-term storage. So essentially, someone is able to remember more items in the short term. Let's say person A can remember 7 digits of the passcode, and person B can remember 10. The theory would then follow or propose that person B, who remembers 10 digits in the short term, will have a slightly greater long-term storage of all memories. Um, Sorry, I'm just trying to cover my notes here. Let's see, there is also effects of stress and how well the information is interpreted upon its first receiving. For instance, for witnesses, if there's a lot of stress around the incident, or even not just witnesses, people in events, if it is a high stress situation, the memories are very obviously affected, and we know this. But what it does is it kind of blocks the pathways of the memory. Um, so if I don't know if you see someone get hit by a car, if it's a high stress situation, although you remember someone get hit by a car, you might not remember what color the shirt was. At that point, you can insert false memories into people. Not that it's nice or oral, but that's what happens. Is you can say, if a police is or a detective is questioning someone, they could say, "Hey, was this person wearing a red shirt or a green shirt?" Well, I don't know. And then they say, "Well, we think they were wearing a green shirt because we saw green fabric on the road." Because you were not paying attention to that and the stress kind of overwhelmed your brain, you might start going along with the green shirt. Just again, covering my notes here. Um, Also, again, on that same uh, topic, long-term representation of memory is also highly correlated with short-term. Doesn't mean a whole lot. Essentially, what have you learned in the short term? And the same information that is rehearsed over and over is essentially sent to long term, so it will be similar to what is learned in the short term. As for the long term, there's two primary methods of rehearsal, or yeah, two forms, and they are, let's see, they are maintenance rehearsal and relational. So the names are fairly simple in terms of what they talk about. Maintenance is when you repeat something over and over and over until it kind of just sticks. Many teachers will do this by reviewing the same topics or phrases or definitions for multiple class periods. In anatomy, for example, which I've already said I'm taking, a teacher will usually, if there's some sort of, um, not euphemism, mnemonic. If there's some sort of mnemonic that we need to learn for memorizing bones or to understand the relationship of something in the muscle, he will say it multiple times every class period and in extracurricular or extra class lectures to help just solidify that. Even if we don't quite memorize the full meaning of it, just hearing it helps us. Or if you go to the test and we have a question, a long-term memory says, okay, I've heard this, this mnemonic, I've heard this alliteration or abbreviation of something 50 times. I think I understand what it means. And that is maintenance rehearsal. On the other end is elaborative or relational. That is where something is fully understood and is then compared to prior knowledge, our understanding of the world, and just makes sense amongst a web of other knowledge. So, for example, and this is what I wrote, so this could be slightly off. I said, for maintenance, it functions not by embedding the information in current knowledge, but rather by creating bridges to the information via simply repeating facts enough to store it. And like it essentially says, you just say it over and over to remember it. For elaborative or um, for elaborative or relational, sorry, I'm going to get those terms mixed up. Let's see, it is used by comparing or evaluating or just taking what you've learned and putting it within other knowledge. Um, Again, I'm going to use my anatomy class. If I'm learning something about the muscle, well, I know the term myo means muscle. So if I learn, otherwise that when you're talking about cells, a sort of cell that creates something is a clast, and something that breaks it down is a blast. Or reverse that. If I learn something is a myoblast, that takes the muscle and the blast, which is muscle and builder, and put it together. Oh, that's a cell that creates muscle. And inversely, myoclast takes it apart. And again, that is drawing on the etymology of the word, and that's a bit simpler, but still, it's taking the prior knowledge and using that to understand what is just being presented. So when he says this, and he says, hey, a myoblast builds, I already understand this because in our previous units, we've learned the terms myo, the prefix meaning muscle, and blast, the prefix meaning build, and put it together. This is something that I appreciate when my teachers do. Some do it better than others. Um, One small problem, and again, I've already touched on this, is that the false memories can be implanted into people, even amongst pre-existing memories. There was a study done, and I had it where it's Blank et al. So a few people, where they found that even amongst strong memories, such as memories of parents with high emotions tied to it, or even traumatic events, people can still be provided false memories to believe. Again, I touched on that. That's just a small part of what I added. I mainly talked about the methods of short and long-term memory, but I think that'll be it. All right, have a good day.